And those are the papers. Well, President Trump has launched another broadside against globalism in his speech to the UN General Assembly. Mr. Trump told world leaders that America would always act in a spirit of patriotism, choosing independence and cooperation over global governance. Joining me now from Sydney is Professor James Crabtree from the Kuan School of Public Policy. Professor Crabtree, thank you so much for joining us. What do you make of President Trump's speech before the UN? Globalism versus patriotism.
Yeah, morning, Rico. I think every time he gives one of these speeches, people hope that there might be a different Trump that turns up, but it's always the same one. So this was a core Trump speech. He was firmly against globalization, as he was last year. It had the tenor of a speech that had been written either by Steve Bannon, his former advisor, or Stephen Miller, his current advisor. And I think you can set that against the backdrop of the current battle with China over trade in particular. And in this one, he had some new targets. And he went after OPEC, the oil cartel, in a public forum in a way that I haven't seen in quite the same way before. So it shows, in a sense, no matter what the audience is, he's got the bit between his teeth and he wants to go forward with this message of anti-globalization.
So can the United States go with it alone?
I mean, I think that's Trump's, that's his aim, whether it's on the trade war or whether it's picking fights with international institutions like the International Criminal Court or now OPEC or the European Union. I mean, he feels like the United States has enough weight to throw around and he plans to throw it around.
So would this mean then that he will lose his allies if he hates globalism so much?
Well, I mean, in a sense, you have to think which audience is he speaking to. The audience in the UN, as it has been reported, literally laughed at some of the parts of his speech. But in a sense, he's speaking to a domestic audience. This is a very complicated moment for Mr. Trump. He's on the back foot because of the allegations about Mr. Kavanaugh. If you looked at his Twitter feed this afternoon, you saw sometimes he was talking about the UN, sometimes he was talking about the Supreme Court nomination. And in a sense, he feels that bashing globalism, as he calls it, and escalating the trade war with the Chinese can only help him in the November midterm elections.
So, Professor Crabtree, is he saying all this in the United Nations to gain an audience in the domestic market ahead of the midterm elections?
I mean, I don't think it's quite that simple. I think, in a sense, he does have a message for the international audience. He has consistently cared about these issues of reasserting bilateral power and American power in the world. Nonetheless, it is pretty clear that part of the people he's talking to here is his own core base, the Republican base he needs to get to turn out. But it's not only doing that. I mean, it was interesting what he said about North Korea, for instance, in this, that he mentioned and was very kind about Kim, the leader of North Korea, by name. And so, in a sense, there were a few other things that he was doing. And I think after this speech, perhaps you could say it's more likely that there might be a second Kim-Trump summit in not too long. I mean, there was a clear signal about what he wants to do on that side of things, too.
Thank you so much for your insights on Trump's speech at the United Nations. James Crabtree from the Kuan School of Public Policy joining us from Sydney.